September 1945. The war is over, but for thousands of Japanese women the journey home has just begun. In a processing facility outside Tokyo they wait, hungry, exhausted, uncertain. Then something unexpected arrives, something they've never seen before. A simple piece of American food that will change everything they thought they knew. This is their story. The morning sun barely breaks through the canvas walls of the tent. Yuki Tanaka sits on a wooden crate, her back straight despite the exhaustion that weighs on her shoulders like wet cloth. Around her, dozens of women huddle in small groups, their voices barely rising above whispers. The facility smells of disinfectant, canvas, and something else she can't quite place. Something foreign. 3 months ago, Yuki worked in a munitions factory in Tokyo. Her hands assembled parts for weapons she never saw used, working 16-hour shifts until her fingers bled. Now those same hands shake as she clutches a thin blanket around her shoulders. The war ended, they said. Japan surrendered, they said. But what does that mean for her? For any of them? Across the tent, Akiko Watanabe kneels beside a younger woman who's crying softly. Akiko's nursing training kicks in automatically. She checks the woman's forehead for fever, examines her eyes, asks gentle questions. But this isn't a physical illness. It's something deeper. Something Akiko feels too but can't name. The weight of defeat. The fear of an uncertain future. The shame that's been drilled into them since childhood about what happens to women after their country loses a war. Akiko is 28, but feels 50. She spent the last year of the war treating wounded soldiers in a makeshift hospital in Osaka, watching boys younger than her brothers die from infections she couldn't cure with the limited supplies they had. When the Americans bombed the city, she pulled survivors from rubble with her bare hands. She saved 17 people that day. She still dreams about the ones she couldn't save. The tent flap opens, and a blast of cool morning air rushes in. Lieutenant Sarah Chen steps inside, a clipboard tucked under her arm. Sarah's uniform is crisp, her posture military perfect, but her eyes are tired. She's been working as an interpreter and liaison officer for 3 weeks now, processing hundreds of women through this facility. Each day brings new faces, new stories, new trauma she's expected to translate and document, without letting her own emotions show. Sarah's parents came to America from Guangzhou before she was born. She grew up speaking Cantonese at home and English everywhere else, always feeling caught between two worlds. When the war started, some neighbors looked at her with suspicion despite her American birth certificate. She joined the military to prove her loyalty, to show she belonged. Now she stands in a tent full of women who look like distant cousins, and she's the face of their conquerors. Behind Sarah, Nurse Helen Sullivan carries a large cardboard box. Helen volunteered with the Red Cross thinking she'd be bandaging wounds and distributing medical supplies. Instead, she's become part therapist, part social worker, part bridge between terrified women and confused soldiers who don't speak each other's languages. Boston feels like a lifetime ago, even though she left only 6 months back. Helen sets the box down with a grunt. It's heavier than it looks. She wipes sweat from her forehead and surveys the tent. 43 women this morning. 43 lives disrupted. 43 stories she'll never fully know. She thinks about her own mother, widowed young, raising 3 kids during the Depression. What would her mother have done in their situation? How would she have survived? Sarah clears her throat and begins speaking in Japanese. Her accent is formal, textbook perfect but lacking the regional variations that would mark her as truly fluent. The women's attention shifts toward her slowly, reluctantly. We have food for distribution this morning. Please form an orderly line. Everyone will receive an equal portion. Yuki doesn't move immediately. She's learned to be cautious, to observe before acting. Around her, other women begin to stand, their movements stiff from sleeping on hard floors. Some are eager, hunger overriding caution. Others hang back like Yuki, watching. In the corner, Harumi Sato remains curled on her mat, face turned toward the wall. At 21, she's one of the youngest here, and it shows in the way she's almost disappeared into herself. Harumi comes from a farming village so small it doesn't appear on most maps. She'd never seen a city until she was conscripted for factory work in Nagoya. She'd never seen an American until 3 weeks ago when soldiers arrived at the factory and loaded all the workers onto trucks. Harumi's village was her entire world. Rice paddies stretching to distant mountains. her father's calloused hands teaching her to plant seedlings in perfectly straight rows, her mother's voice singing folk songs while preparing dinner. The war touched them through radio broadcasts and recruiting officers, but it felt abstract, distant. Then her older brother was drafted. 6 months later, they received a wooden box with his ashes and a letter praising his sacrifice. Her mother stopped singing after that. Helen notices Harumi's stillness and walks over, kneeling beside her mat. She doesn't speak Japanese and Harumi doesn't speak English, but Helen has learned that tone and body language transcend words. She places a gentle hand on Harumi's shoulder. "Hey there. You need to eat something. Come on." Harumi doesn't respond. Helen looks up at Sarah, silently asking for help. Sarah approaches and translates, her voice softer now. "The nurse is concerned about you. You haven't eaten in 2 days. Please, you need to keep your strength up." Harumi's voice is barely audible when she finally speaks. "Why? What's the point?" Sarah hesitates before translating this for Helen. Some things don't need translation. The despair in Harumi's tone carries its own meaning. Helen has seen this before, in field hospitals and refugee camps. She's learned that sometimes you can't argue with despair. You can only sit with it and offer small, concrete things: food, water, presence. The line forms slowly. Yuki joins it, positioning herself in the middle where she can observe everything. She watches as Helen and Sarah begin distributing items from the box. The smell hits her first. Meat. Bread. Something tangy and sharp. Her stomach clenches with hunger so intense it's almost painful. She hasn't had meat in over a year. Toward the end of the war, they survived on rice mixed with sawdust and potato vines. Akiko stands in line behind Yuki. The two women don't know each other well, but they've developed the casual recognition that comes from sharing space in difficult circumstances. Akiko leans forward slightly. "Do you know what they're giving us?" Yuki shakes her head. "American food. That's all I know." Akiko's medical training makes her think about nutrition, calories, safety. Is it clean? Will it make us sick? She's seen what contaminated food can do, the dysentery outbreaks that killed more soldiers than some battles. But she's also desperately hungry, and the smell is making her mouth water despite her concerns. The woman at the front of the line receives her portion and stares at it with obvious confusion. It's a long piece of bread, split down the middle, with a cylindrical piece of meat nestled inside. Yellow and red sauces drip from the sides. She holds it awkwardly, unsure whether to use her hands or wait for chopsticks. Helen demonstrates by miming eating, bringing her hand to her mouth. The woman tentatively lifts the food and takes a small bite. Her eyes widen. She chews slowly, processing the explosion of unfamiliar flavors. Salt, fat, sweetness, tang. It's overwhelming and strange, and she's not sure if she likes it, but she takes another bite because she's so hungry. As each woman receives her portion, similar reactions ripple through the tent. Confusion, curiosity, surprise. Some women bite tentatively. Others devour their food with desperate speed. A few hold their portions without eating, staring at the strange American creation as if it might reveal secrets. Yuki reaches the front of the line. Helen hands her a hot dog and smiles, the same professional kind smile she's given everyone. Yuki accepts it with a small bow, an ingrained gesture of politeness that persists despite everything. She returns to her spot and examines her food carefully. The bread is soft, softer than anything she's had in years. The meat is longer than she expected, stretching the full length of the bread. She remembers the title of an American film she saw before the war, something about cowboys in the Wild West. She remembers propaganda posters warning that Americans were barbarians with no culture. But she also remembers American jazz records her older cousin played secretly, the music that made her want to dance despite herself. She takes a bite. The flavors are shocking. The meat has a smoky quality she's never tasted before, with a texture that's both firm and yielding. The mustard makes her nose sting. The ketchup adds sweetness she didn't expect. The bread cushions everything, soft and slightly sweet itself. It's strange. It's foreign. It's also the most food she's tasted in months, and her body responds with desperate gratitude. Beside her, Akiko eats with the focused intensity of someone who's learned not to waste anything. She analyzes the food as she chews. Protein, carbohydrates, fats. Her body needs all of it. Between bites, she thinks about the American nurses and doctors she's observed over the past weeks. They're efficient, often brusque, but not cruel. They treat injuries with supplies she could only dream of during the war: penicillin, clean bandages, actual anesthetic. She feels a complicated mix of resentment and envy. Across the tent, Sarah watches the women eat and feels the familiar tension in her chest. She's good at her job, good at maintaining professional distance, good at being the bridge, but every day chips away at that distance. She hears stories that haunt her: a mother separated from her children, a teacher who watched her school burn with students inside, a young girl barely older than Sarah's youngest sister who won't speak about what happened to her in the final chaotic days of the war. Sarah's own family faced discrimination and fear, but they were never bombed, never occupied, never defeated. She has nightmares sometimes where she's on the other side, where she's one of these women, and she wakes up sweating and guilty for feeling grateful she's not. Helen finishes distributing the food and sits on a crate near the tent entrance. She pulls out a canteen and drinks, watching the women eat. This is the part of her job she actually likes. Not the paperwork or the bureaucracy or the endless meetings with military officials who see these women as problems to process. But this: basic human care, food, water, a moment of relief in their faces. A young woman approaches Helen hesitantly. It's Harumi. She's holding her hot dog but hasn't eaten any of it. She speaks in Japanese, her voice uncertain. Helen doesn't understand the words but calls Sarah over. She's asking if the food is safe, if it will hurt her. Sarah translates and Helen's expression softens. She unwraps her own hot dog, one she grabbed from the supply truck earlier, and takes a large bite. She chews, swallows, and smiles at Harumi. See? Safe. It's good. Try it. Harumi watches Helen eat. There's something about the nurse's open, friendly face that reminds her of her older sister. Her sister who stayed in the village to care for their grieving mother. Her sister she may never see again if the rumors about food shortages and starvation in rural areas are true. Tears prick at Harumi's eyes, but she blinks them back. She's cried enough. She's so tired of crying. She lifts the hot dog to her mouth and bites. The taste is strange, nothing like the food from home. But it's warm and substantial, and her stomach welcomes it. She takes another bite, then another, and before she realizes it, she's finished the entire thing. She looks at her empty hands in surprise. Helen laughs gently and gives Harumi a thumbs up. Harumi doesn't know what the gesture means exactly, but she understands it's positive. For the first time in weeks, something that might be a smile tugs at the corner of her mouth. Yuki finishes her food and licks the last traces of mustard from her fingers. Around her, the tent has changed. The oppressive silence has lifted slightly. Women talk in low voices, comparing reactions to the strange American food. Someone actually laughs, a sound so unexpected in this place that several heads turn toward it. Akiko approaches Yuki, wiping her hands on her worn dress. That was the strangest thing I've ever eaten. Yuki nods. Strange, but not bad. The two women sit together on a shared crate. Neither speaks for a moment, but the silence isn't uncomfortable. It's the silence of shared experience, of survival. I was a nurse in Osaka, Akiko says suddenly. Before, during, I watched the city burn. Yuki looks at her. Factory worker. Tokyo. Same story. Different city. Akiko studies Yuki's face. She sees strength there, resilience. She sees someone who might understand. Do you think we'll actually make it home? Yuki is quiet for a long moment. Then she says, I think we'll make it somewhere. Whether that's home or something else, I don't know. But we're still alive. That has to mean something. It's not a comforting answer, but it's honest. Akiko appreciates the honesty more than empty reassurance. Lieutenant Sarah Chen moves through the tent, checking on the women, answering questions when she can. She stops when she reaches Yuki and Akiko, asking in Japanese if they need anything else. Both women shake their heads. Sarah nods and turns to continue her rounds, but Yuki speaks up. Lieutenant, can I ask you something? Sarah turns back. Of course. You're Chinese American, yes? Your accent when you speak Japanese, it has certain characteristics. Sarah's surprised. Most people don't pick up on the subtle linguistic markers. Yes. My parents are from China. I was born in San Francisco. And you serve in the American military. Sarah's guard goes up slightly. She's had this conversation before, usually as a prelude to accusations or resentment. Yes. I'm an American officer. But Yuki's next words aren't what she expects. That must be complicated, being between worlds like that. Sarah stares at this Japanese woman, this former factory worker, and feels something crack in her careful professional facade. Yes, it's very complicated. They look at each other for a moment, an understanding passing between them that transcends nationality or uniforms or the circumstances that brought them to this tent. They're both caught between identities, trying to figure out where they belong in a world that's been shattered and is slowly, painfully reassembling itself. The moment breaks when Helen calls Sarah over to help with a medical question. Sarah excuses herself, but she glances back at Yuki once before moving away. As the morning progresses, the tent settles into a new rhythm. The food has helped, giving the women energy and something other than fear to focus on. Small conversations bloom. Someone mentions that the American hot dog reminds her of a festival food from her childhood, though the flavors were different. Another woman wonders aloud what other strange foods Americans eat. A third makes a joke about the size of the hot dogs and several women laugh, the sound startling and wonderful. Harumi finds herself in a small group of younger women. They're talking about their villages and cities, about the lives they had before the war consumed everything. Harumi listens more than she speaks, but she's listening. That's progress. Yesterday, she couldn't bear to hear anyone's voice, not even her own. One girl, maybe 19, talks about working in her family's noodle shop in Kyoto. She describes the process of making fresh udon, her hands moving as if kneading invisible dough. I want to go back to that, she says. Just making noodles. Just feeding people. Simple things. Another woman nods emphatically. I was a teacher. Elementary school. I want to go back to teaching children their letters, watching them learn to read. I don't want to think about war or politics or any of it. Just children and books. Harumi finds her voice, small but steady. I want to plant rice again. In my village. With my family. The way we did before. The women sit with that for a moment, each holding their own version of that dream. A return to normal life. A life where hot dogs are just food, not a symbol of occupation and defeat. A life where they're not refugees in their own country, waiting for permission to go home, but they're also realistic enough to know that the world they left doesn't exist anymore. Japan is defeated, occupied, transformed. Their villages and cities are damaged or destroyed. Their families are scattered or gone. The normal they want to return to is impossible. They'll have to build something new, and none of them know what that looks like yet. Helen watches these interactions from across the tent and feels a familiar mix of hope and heartbreak. She's seen this pattern in other places, other conflicts. The initial shock and trauma giving way slowly to small human connections. The way shared food, even strange American hot dogs, can create moments of normalcy. The resilience of women who've survived impossible things. She thinks about her own privilege, her ability to be here by choice, to leave when her rotation ends, to return to a home that wasn't bombed or burned. She thinks about the distance between her life and theirs, and how thin that distance actually is. Different circumstances, different luck. That's all. Sarah approaches Helen with her clipboard. We have transport scheduled for tomorrow morning. 20 women in this group will be moved to the next processing station closer to their home regions. Helen nods. Do they know yet? Not yet. I'll make the announcement this afternoon. Helen glances at the women, now animated in a way they weren't this morning. Some will be relieved. Some will be anxious about another move, another transition. Some will be separated from the tentative friendships they've formed here. It's necessary, part of the repatriation process, but that doesn't make it easy. The afternoon passes slowly. The women are given work assignments to keep them occupied and give structure to the day. Some help with laundry, others with food preparation, a few with basic facility maintenance. It's simple work, but purposeful. Better than sitting with nothing to do but think and worry. Yuki is assigned to help sort medical supplies in the corner of the tent that serves as an infirmary. Akiko is there too, her nursing background making her invaluable. The two women work side by side, creating order from chaos, organizing bandages and medicine bottles. You're good at this, Yuki observes. The medical work. Akiko shrugs. I had good training, and a lot of practice during the war. Too much practice. Do you think you'll go back to nursing? After? Akiko pauses, a roll of gauze in her hands. I don't know. Part of me wants to. It's what I know, what I'm good at. But another part of me has seen too much, lost too many patients. I'm not sure I can go back to that. Yuki understands this. She has her own complicated feelings about factory work, about the things her hands built, about the role she played in a war machine that ultimately failed and cost so much. What would you do instead? Akiko considers this. Maybe work with children, teach health and hygiene, preventative care instead of emergency medicine, something that builds instead of just trying to stop the bleeding. It's a good vision. Yuki tells her so. Akiko smiles, grateful for the validation. What about you? Akiko asks. Will you go back to factory work? Yuki shakes her head firmly. No, never. I want to work with my hands but create something I can be proud of. Maybe pottery. My grandmother was a potter before she got sick. She tried to teach me when I was young, but I was impatient, thought it was boring. I'd give anything to go back to those lessons now. The two women continue working, their conversation flowing between practical observations and deeper reflections. They're building something here, a friendship perhaps, or at least a connection that will help them both survive whatever comes next. Across the tent, Harumi sits with Helen, who's teaching her a simple English phrase. Hello, my name is Harumi. Helen pronounces each word slowly, and Harumi repeats them, her accent thick, but her effort genuine. Helen points to herself. Helen, then to Harumi, waiting. Harumi, the young woman says. Helen beams and nods encouragingly. She pulls out a small notepad and draws simple pictures, pointing to objects around the tent and naming them in English. Tent, crate, blanket, water. Harumi absorbs the words like a sponge, her mind grateful for something concrete to focus on. Sarah watches this interaction and feels a tightness in her throat. This is what she hoped for when she joined up, these small bridges being built between former enemies. Not the bureaucracy or the paperwork or the endless processing, but actual human connection. Two women from opposite sides of the world, finding ways to communicate despite having no common language. But Sarah also knows how fragile these bridges are. Tomorrow, some of these women will move on. Helen's rotation ends in 6 weeks. Sarah herself will be reassigned eventually. These connections they're building are temporary by nature, small lights in the chaos of post-war reorganization. She wants to believe they matter anyway. She has to believe that. The afternoon announcement about the transport comes as expected. Sarah reads the names of the 20 women who will leave tomorrow. Some cry with relief. Others look stricken. Harumi's name is on the list. She'll be transported to a facility near her home region, one step closer to her village and family. She should be happy. She tries to be happy, but she looks at Helen, the kind nurse who taught her English words and made her smile, and feels an unexpected grief at leaving. That evening, the tent takes on a different energy. The women who are leaving tomorrow gather their meager belongings, saying quiet goodbyes. Those staying offer good wishes and promises to remember each other. It's bittersweet, this transition. They all want to go home, but leaving means losing the fragile community they've built in this difficult place. Yuki and Akiko sit together as night falls, sharing a thin blanket against the cooling air. Do you think they'll meet again after this? Yuki asks, gesturing toward two women saying tearful goodbyes. Akiko considers this. Probably not. Japan is big and we've all been scattered. But maybe that's okay. Maybe the point isn't whether we see each other again. Maybe the point is that we survived this together. That counts for something. Yuki nods slowly. Yes, that counts for something. Harumi approaches Helen one last time before bed. Through Sarah's translation, she thanks Helen for her kindness. Helen hugs her gently, this young woman who reminds her of every little sister she's ever worried about. She presses a small bar of chocolate into Harumi's hand, saved from her own rations. For the journey, Sarah translates. Harumi clutches the chocolate and bows deeply, formally, her gratitude transcending language barriers. When she straightens, there are tears in her eyes, but also something else. Determination, maybe. Hope, the belief that she might actually make it home after all. That night, Yuki lies awake listening to the sounds of 43 women breathing, shifting, sleeping fitfully or not at all. She thinks about the strange American hot dog, about how something so simple became a moment of unexpected connection. She thinks about Akiko and her dream of teaching children, about Harumi and her village rice paddies, about Lieutenant Chen caught between her Chinese heritage and American identity, about Nurse Helen and her steady kindness. She thinks about her own future, uncertain and frightening, but also, for the first time, possible. The war destroyed so much. Her city, her livelihood, the future she thought she'd have. But it didn't destroy her. She's still here, still capable, still able to imagine pottery wheels and clay taking shape under her grandmother's patient guidance. Tomorrow 20 women will leave. In the coming weeks, the rest will follow. This tent, this temporary community, will dissolve as if it never existed. But the women will carry these moments with them. The taste of an unexpectedly large American hot dog, the kindness of strangers, the friendships forged in impossible circumstances, the realization that they're stronger than they believed possible. The next morning arrives too quickly. The transport truck idles outside, its engine rumbling like distant thunder. The 20 women gather their belongings such as they are. Helen and Sarah help them board, checking names against the roster, offering last-minute supplies and encouragement. Harumi pauses at the truck's tailgate, looking back at the tent that's been her home for 3 weeks. It's just canvas and poles and hard ground, but it meant safety when she had none. She waves to the women still inside, to Yuki and Akiko, who wave back. She climbs into the truck. Helen watches the truck pull away, dust rising in its wake. She's done this dozens of times now, said goodbye to dozens of women she'll never see again. It doesn't get easier. She wonders about Harumi's village, whether her family survived, whether the rice paddies are still there, or if they've been destroyed. She'll never know. That's the hardest part, never knowing how the stories end. Inside the tent, the remaining women resettle. The space feels emptier now, echoes differently. Yuki and Akiko continue their work in the medical supply area. They don't talk much, but their companionship is comfortable. They both know that soon it will be Akiko's turn to leave, then Yuki's. They're all in transit, moving from one uncertain situation toward another. But for now, they're here. They're fed. They're safe enough. And they have each other, these temporary connections that might not last but matter anyway. Lieutenant Sarah Chen updates her paperwork, checking names off lists, filing reports. Her handwriting is precise, her documentation thorough. She's good at this job because she treats each woman as an individual, not just a number to process. It takes longer, creates more work, but it's the only way she can do this, and still sleep at night. Later that afternoon, another supply truck arrives. Helen helps unload boxes, her muscles straining with the weight. More food, more medical supplies, more blankets, and another box of hot dogs. She smiles despite herself. The women have started calling them American sausages, discussing them with a mix of amusement and curiosity. Some women liked them, some didn't. Some found them too salty, too strange, too everything. But they all ate them, and they all have opinions now about American food. It's humanizing somehow, this shared experience of trying something new and unexpected. As Helen distributes the hot dogs that evening, she notices the women are less hesitant than before. They know what to expect now. They bite into their food with more confidence, less fear. Small thing, probably meaningless in the grand scheme of post-war recovery. But Helen has learned that recovery happens in small things. A hot dog eaten without fear. An English word learned and practiced. A smile exchanged between former enemies. Yuki takes her hot dog and examines it like an old friend. Still strange, she thinks, but familiar strange now. She can identify the components, the taste profile. She's adapted, as humans do. She bites and chews and swallows, fueling her body for whatever comes next. Akiko eats methodically, her medical mind still categorizing nutrients. But she also allows herself to simply enjoy the food, the temporary satisfaction of a full stomach. Tomorrow is uncertain, next week is unknown. But right now, in this moment, she has food and shelter and a friend sitting beside her. That's enough. It has to be. That night, Sarah Chen writes a letter to her parents in San Francisco. She doesn't tell them about the hard parts, the trauma she witnesses daily, the way some of these women's stories haunt her. Instead, she writes about the resilience she sees, the small acts of kindness, the way Helen taught a young woman English words using pictures and patience. She writes about how complicated it is, being the bridge, but also how necessary. Her parents will understand. They've been bridges their whole lives, between China and America, between the old country and the new. Helen writes a letter, too, to her sister in Boston. She describes the women she's met, careful not to violate their privacy, but wanting to convey their strength and courage. She describes distributing hot dogs and watching confusion turn to curiosity, turn to acceptance. Such a small thing, she writes, but somehow it feels important, like we're finding ways to be human together, despite everything that's happened. The weeks pass. More women come through the facility. More women leave, transported closer to their home regions. Yuki and Akiko's turns eventually come. They say goodbye to each other, with promises to remember, to survive, to build something good in whatever comes next. They exchange addresses, knowing the likelihood of letters reaching each other is slim, but wanting to try anyway. Yuki's transport takes her closer to Tokyo, to the ruins of her former life. She carries her small bundle of belongings and a head full of memories from the processing tent. When she arrives at the facility near her home district, she begins asking about pottery schools, about apprenticeships. Her grandmother died during the war, but perhaps someone else can teach her. Perhaps she can learn to create beauty from clay, using hands that once built weapons. Akiko finds herself in a facility near Osaka, her devastated city. She volunteers in the medical tent immediately, her skills too valuable to waste. But she also asks about schools, about children who need health education. She's planting seeds for her future, even as she tends to the immediate needs of the present. Harumi makes it to her village. The rice paddies are damaged but not destroyed. Her mother is alive. Her sister is alive. They weep when they see each other, holding on as if they'll never let go. That night, Harumi eats her mother's cooking, simple rice and pickled vegetables, and it tastes like home. But she also remembers the strange American hot dog, the kind nurse, the women in the tent who showed her that survival is possible. She carries those memories like treasures. Lieutenant Sarah Chen continues her work, processing hundreds more women over the coming months. Each one has a story. Each one matters. She's exhausted and homesick and sometimes overwhelmed, but she doesn't regret choosing this path. She's making a difference, building bridges, helping women find their way home. It's hard work but meaningful work, and that matters. Helen Sullivan completes her rotation and returns to Boston. She brings with her memories of women whose names she sometimes remembers and sometimes doesn't, but whose faces and stories have marked her permanently. She goes back to nursing at Massachusetts General Hospital, but she's changed. She sees patients differently now, understanding that everyone carries invisible trauma, that kindness costs nothing and means everything. Years pass. Japan rebuilds. The occupation ends. The women scattered through processing facilities across the country find their ways forward, creating new lives from the rubble of the old. Some thrive. Some struggle. Some are forever marked by what they survived. All of them remember. Yuki becomes a potter, her work gaining recognition for its simple beauty and strength. She teaches apprentices in her small studio in Tokyo, passing on the skills her grandmother once tried to teach her. Sometimes she tells them about the war years, about the processing tent, about the strange American food that somehow represented a turning point. They listen politely, these young students who know war only from history books. She doesn't mind. She's grateful they have that luxury. Akiko becomes an educator, traveling to rural schools teaching children about health and hygiene. She saves lives through prevention rather than emergency medicine, and it heals something in her that the war broke. She never marries, never has children of her own, but she touches thousands of young lives. That's its own form of legacy. Harumi stays in her village, working the family rice paddies. She marries a local man whose gentleness helps her heal from traumas she never fully speaks about. They have 3 children. She teaches them to plant rice in perfectly straight rows, to respect the land, to appreciate simple things. Sometimes she thinks about the tent, the women, the kind nurse who gave her chocolate. She hopes they're all okay, wherever they are. Sarah Chen makes the military her career, rising through the ranks to become one of the first Asian American women to reach senior officer status. She never loses her commitment to bridge building, to seeing individuals rather than enemies. She lectures about the importance of cultural understanding in military operations. Some listen, some don't. She persists anyway because she knows the work matters. Helen Sullivan spends 30 more years nursing. She specializes in trauma care, bringing the lessons from her Red Cross service to everything she does. She treats every patient with the same gentle dignity she showed those women in the tent. When she finally retires, dozens of former patients write letters thanking her for her kindness during their darkest moments. She keeps the letters in a box by her bed, reading them when she needs reminding of why she chose this work. The hot dog, that absurdly symbolic American food, becomes part of Japan's post-war cultural landscape. Hot dog stands appear in Tokyo and Osaka and Nagoya. Japanese versions emerge, with different toppings and preparations. It becomes ordinary, unremarkable, but for a certain generation of women it always carries a different meaning. It's a memory of a specific moment when they were powerless and afraid but also resilient and human, when they tried something foreign and survived, when they connected with strangers who became, briefly, essential. History books document the American occupation of Japan, the rebuilding process, the political and economic transformations. They mention repatriation efforts and processing facilities in footnotes if at all. They don't mention hot dogs or English lessons or two women becoming friends while organizing medical supplies. These small moments aren't considered historically significant. But for the women who lived them, these moments were everything. They were the difference between despair and hope, between isolation and connection, between being a problem to process and a human being deserving of dignity. They were proof that even in the worst circumstances, kindness is possible, that bridges can be built between enemies, that a simple piece of food, strange and unexpected, can become a symbol of survival and adaptation. Decades later, when Yuki is an old woman, a young journalist interviews her for an oral history project about post-war experiences. The journalist asks about the occupation, about hardships, about political opinions. Yuki answers patiently, giving the expected responses, but then she tells the story about the hot dogs, about Nurse Helen and Lieutenant Chen, about Akiko and Harumi and the tent full of women trying to find their way home. The journalist doesn't quite understand why Yuki focuses on this seemingly trivial detail. Hot dogs? Really? But Yuki insists it matters. They were bigger than we expected, she says, both the hot dogs and the moment. Everything was bigger than we expected. The war, the defeat, the fear, but also the resilience, the kindness, the connections. All of it bigger than we knew we could handle until we handled it anyway. The journalist includes a brief mention of the hot dog story in the published oral history. Most readers skip over it, looking for more dramatic details. But a few readers, particularly women of a certain age, pause at that passage. They remember their own strange foods in difficult times, their own unexpected moments of connection, their own realization that they were stronger than they believed possible, because that's what the hot dog represented in the end. Not American cultural imperialism or occupation policy or economic aid. Just the simple, profound truth that humans can adapt to almost anything. That strange can become familiar. That enemies can become friends. That even in defeat and displacement, life continues. Meals are eaten. Friendships are formed. Hope persists. They were a lot bigger than we expected, those American hot dogs. And so were we. So much bigger than we ever imagined we could be. Big enough to survive the unsurvivable. Big enough to build new lives from ruins. Big enough to carry forward, creating something meaningful from the fragments of what was lost. That's the story. Not just of hot dogs or processing tents or specific women in a specific place and time, but of human resilience, of connection across divides, of small kindnesses that ripple outward in ways we can never fully measure, of survival not as a dramatic single moment, but as a series of ordinary days, each one a small victory over despair. Yuki finishes her interview and the journalist leaves. She returns to her pottery wheel, her hands shaping clay with decades of practiced skill. She makes a teacup, simple and beautiful. As she works, she thinks about those women in the tent. She wonders if Akiko ever made it to her dream of teaching children, if Harumi found peace in her village, if Lieutenant Chen and Nurse Helen understood how much their kindness mattered. She'll never know. That's okay. Some stories don't have endings, just continuations beyond our knowledge. What matters is the moment itself, the connection, the choosing to be human and kind even when the world offers every excuse not to be. She finishes the teacup and sets it aside to dry. Tomorrow she'll fire it, transform it from soft clay to permanent ceramic. It's a kind of magic, this transformation. Not so different from what happened to all of them in that tent. They went in broken and afraid, They didn't come out fixed, nothing could fix what war had done, but they came out changed, transformed by survival and connection into something new, something that could hold water without breaking, something useful and beautiful and strong. The sun sets over Tokyo, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Yuki watches from her studio window, her hands still dusty with clay. She's 78 years old now. She's survived war and occupation and peace and rebuilding. She's created thousands of pottery pieces. She's taught dozens of students. She's lived a full life, rich with meaning if not always easy. And sometimes, on quiet evenings like this, she still thinks about that strange American hot dog. Too big, too salty, too different, too everything, and somehow exactly what they needed. If you found this story powerful, please subscribe to our channel for more untold histories. Give us a like if this moved you, and leave a comment sharing your thoughts or stories from your own family's history. These voices from the past deserve to be heard, and your engagement helps us continue sharing them. Thank you for being part of this journey through history.